is
You're being recorded right now.
It's going to be very famous. Okay. So we talked about the Dust Bowl, right? Why did the Dust Bowl happen? Because of the farmers, right? What?
There was wind and dust.
Well, what did they do after World War I? Prices were really good. They were making lots of money, so they farmed everything. Every year, farm everything. And then the prices declined, so then they got to farm more to make a little, right? And so it spiraled out of control, so we're farming everything. Then in the 30s, we have a really bad depression that lasted year after year, and we farmed up everything. So what happens with the topsoil? It just starts blowing. I also talked about why do we turn our cups upside down? Because during the Dust Bowl, the dust would find its way into the houses, and if you left a cup, it would fill up like a quarter to half or all the way. That's how much dust was blowing. They said so much dust was blowing around during the Dust Bowl that from North Dakota to Texas, that's where it happened, the Great Plains, the dust would blow all the way to the East Coast. Crazy. Oh, and here's some of the pictures. I gotta click this.
Mr. Anderson, can I go to the office and get another blue band?
Yeah. So here's the Dust Bowl. You can see the pictures.
That one right here.
No, I need
I'm not gonna.
a rubber.
Oh.
Yeah.
She
She doesn't want a real hair one.
Yeah.
Why do you have a hair one on your wrist? I don't want.
I don't know.
So look here. Here's a dust storm right there. It looks like something that would happen in a desert. That tractor's covered up with dust. Look at this house. It looks like a snowdrift. But that's dust. That car's covered up with dust. A lot of hardship during the Great Depression. So another reason that they called the Great Depression also the Dirty 30s because of the drought and the dust. And then it was not a good time. Everything was dirty. So it's called the Dirty 30s. That was the Dust Bowl just ago. Then we talked about direct relief. And I think that was the last part that we talked about. Direct relief is basically what? Giving food or cash directly to the poor people. Direct relief. Now, did Hoover believe in direct relief?
Yeah.
No. He believed in helping charities help the poor. Helping groups help the economy. Now, he had some advisors, and the advisors that he had basically said the economy of the United States goes in waves. And it goes through economic slowdowns. And this is just an economic slowdown, so we don't do anything. And so Hoover believed in his advisors and the people of the time period. A lot of people said it. Don't do anything. It'll come out of it, and it'll be great. The problem is he was elected in 28. The Great Depression started in October 29th, 1929. So almost 2 years into his administration. Another year, everything got worse. Okay? And where and who do they blame? Hoover, Hoovervilles, Hoover blankets, Hoover flags. We talked about those, right? Okay, you need to know those because those are easy questions on the test. Now, Hoover believed in what we're going to call rugged individualism. Rugged individualism. The idea that people should succeed through their own efforts. Through their own efforts. People should succeed through their own efforts. Rugged individualism. He believed that people should take care of themselves and each other, and the government should encourage private groups to help the needy, like Salvation Army and YMCA and the food kitchens and the bread lines and the different places like that. Okay? None of these steps made a difference, and the economy kept on getting worse. It shrank, and unemployment continued to go up. Okay? Finally, when things are almost not, it's past the time where Hoover is really doing anything. So he finally says, okay, he has a project, and he created what is known as the Boulder Dam. What does this do? It creates jobs because it takes a lot of people. Here is the Boulder Dam, and is on the end of the Colorado River. It's all the way in Vegas, well, outside of Vegas. Colorado River runs through Nevada. Okay, and it created a lot of jobs. This is a huge job to put people to work, and it creates hydroelectricity. And people even go today to see it. Has anybody been to the Boulder Dam? They renamed it what? The Hoover Dam.
Yeah, I've been there.
Yeah, you've been there? It's huge, isn't it? It's also where they hide the Decepticons. Right?
It's so cool.
Right. It was a cool
I'm a
movie.
huge Transformers fan.
I know,
How do you know?
because I am too.
Oh,
That's how I know. Because it's a good movie.
good. Watch like the Gen 1 cartoons.
Oh yeah, no.
No.
I don't have enough time to watch cartoons.
They're like literally.
Oh, we used to watch Transformer cartoons all the time. Yes.
Yeah.
And then we used to have the little cars that that was my age, man.
Mm.
That was me. Little Transformer,
Me too.
of course. Now, this was one of the things that it helped a little bit, but it still did turn a lot of stuff around. So the 1930 midterm election wasn't good for Republicans because Hoover was a Republican, so a lot of seats were lost to Democrats in 1930. The midterm election is halfway in between presidential elections. So the next presidential election is 1932, which we're going to hit pretty soon. Well, 1931, the economy still had not improved, and Congress passed the Federal Home Loan Bank Act. Federal Home Loan Bank Act. What do you think that does?
People can get home loans easier. Maybe.
Well, you're not too far off. The Federal Home Loan Bank Act actually allowed homeowners to refinance if they're about to lose their home or their farm, because they're like, we can't let people lose their houses. We can't let people lose their farms, because who's going to feed America if the farmers all lose this? And I think I talked about this, but from 1929 to 1932, 400,000 farmers lost their land. That's crazy. So this law lowered mortgage rates, helped to people from losing their house and their farms. Maybe they could refinance and get a better mortgage so they could make payments. Huh?
What does refinance mean?
So they already have a loan, but the interest rates are higher. So refinance means rework a loan with better interest rates. Refinance just means give another loan for money. It doesn't always have to be better interest rates, but most of the time people don't refinance unless they do get better interest rates. It doesn't make any sense to refinance if you don't get better loans. Now, Hoover also created what is known as the Reconstruction Finance Corporation, the RFC. Corporation. The RFC provided money for projects to create jobs. And finally, close to the end of his terms, he's like, I got to do something. But it was almost too late. And by this time, he did something that made his popularity even plummet further. So during World War I, veterans, the people fighting, the soldiers, didn't get very good pay during World War I, and they were promised a bonus once they came home. Well, now it's 12 years later, the Great Depression hits, and they are really poor, and they want their bonus. We want our wartime pay, we want that bonus. And so Congress was going to vote on the wartime pay bonus. So all these veterans decided they're gonna pack up and they're going to DC to get their pay directly from Congress. And so them and their families, veterans and their families, traveled to DC. They camped out in tents outside of DC, waiting for this bonus. It was called the Bonus Army. Okay, the Bonus Army. And they set up tents, and at first Hoover was like, this is great. He sent food and supplies to the Bonus Army. But then Congress voted on this bonus, this wartime bonus, and they voted it down. So Hoover said, you guys need to go back home. Many of them did, but there was about 2,000 that stayed. So what did he do? Well, since it made his popularity even fall further, this is 1932, he had the U.S. Army troops use tear gas on veterans to get them out of D.C. Not a good move. Okay? Using tear gas on your own veterans is a bad move, especially during a presidential election year. Bad move. So citizens were outraged with Hoover. The economy was in shambles. And so in 1932, we have a new president by the name of Franklin Delano Roosevelt. Or FDR. Becomes a 32nd president, and he wins by a landslide. Okay? Also, the Democrats win large majorities in the House and the Senate. So what can a president do if he's Democratic? The majority in the House is Democratic. The majority in the Senate is Democratic. What can that president do? Anything he wants. Some of the hardest presidencies are when the House and the Senate are opposite the president or even split because they fight against each other and then they block and laws and different things that one group wants to get in. And so now we have a Democratic president, a Democratic House majority, a Democratic Senate majority, and so this is huge. So Roosevelt and his advisors planned programs to end the Great Depression, and he called those the New Deal. So we've had presidents and their programs. Teddy Roosevelt was the Square Deal, right? And Wilson was New Freedom or something like that. So this is the New Deal. Okay? The New Deal had 3 goals. Number 1, I'm going to do it right under this. Relief for the needy. Number 2, economic recovery. And number 3, financial reform. Relief for the needy, economic recovery, financial reform. In the first 100 days of Congress, they passed a lot of these important laws. They expanded the federal government's role in the nation's economy to help create jobs and turn the economy around. The first thing Roosevelt did was he declared a bank holiday. What is a bank holiday? Bank holiday. Anybody? What does a bank do on a holiday? It closes. So the first thing he did is he closed down all the banks. Why? Because he didn't want any more unhealthy banks to fail. I'll just hand those to you for right now. You can pass them out in the crowd. Chloe has 5. Okay, so he closed down all the banks, and Congress then passed the Emergency Banking Relief Act. Emergency Banking Relief Act, which allowed only the healthy banks to reopen. The Emergency Banking Relief Act only allowed the healthy banks to reopen. So this went through and evaluated all the banks and only allowed the ones that were not going to fail to reopen. They also passed what is known as the Glass-Steagall Act. There is just a ton of glass. The Glass-Steagall Act established a very, very important thing, and it's called the FDIC. Does anybody know what the FDIC is? What does everybody think F is? Federal, okay, you got that. How about a D? You're not going to get the D, so it's deposit. I, insurance, and C is corporation. A lot of times you can work through these acronyms, and so there is a ton of acronyms coming up. And so don't go panic when I might give a little hints in the questions, and I might put FDIC was this, and then you have to figure out what FDIC is, or AAA, or CCC, or the FERA, and we're gonna have a ton of them coming up. We're gonna get to that. I was just going ahead a little bit. So Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation. Insurance Corporation. Does anybody know what that does? So Cooper heads to the bank, and he has a lot of money. I don't know, he might be a drug lord. But he goes to the bank and he opens up a savings account. And he puts his $300,000 in the savings account. We don't know where Cooper got it because we're a little, whatever, Cooper. So we let him open this savings account up. He puts his $300,000 in there. But in the small print, it said the FDIC insures this up to $250,000. So if the bank goes bankrupt, how much money does he have? $250,000. How much does he lose? $50,000. So if he was a smart drug lord, he probably would have opened 2 accounts, and that way his money is safe, right? I don't know exactly what the insurance rates are because I don't even get close to anywhere the rates are. I don't have that much money. But I know it's like 200, 250, I don't know. There's different rates too for different savings accounts and bank accounts. So it's all different, but that's something for you guys to think about. Of course, somebody said, that's why millionaires have like hundreds of different accounts. They spread their money out, so you can't, if something happens, then I don't know. And I'm not a millionaire, so I don't know if that's really true. Okay. Now, so the FDIC was huge, and because of the bank holiday and the federal emergency, or the Emergency Banking Relief Act, closing the banks down and only letting the healthy ones open, the Glass-Steagall, the FDIC, people are like trusting banks more. This is a huge thing, and they never had them before. They lost their money a couple different times in American history because of banks closing down. So now, I don't think, since this has happened, I don't think banks have ever closed. People haven't lost their money like they had before. And so this was huge. Now, the stock market was also a huge issue because of the crash. And so Congress passed what is known as the Federal Securities Act, the FSA, Federal Securities Act. Federal Securities Act. The Federal Securities Act basically said that the companies had to give accurate information in its stock offerings. So a lot of times they were, you could pull up a dummy company and put it in the stock market and do really well, but they lied about what it was producing and how much it was making and different things. And now they said we have to have accurate information on the stock offerings. They also later on passed something to help the stock market, and it was called the SEC, the Securities Exchange Commission, SEC. And exchange. Securities and Exchange Commission to regulate the stock market. Now, before Black Tuesday happened, a month before, about exactly a month before in September, the stock market went down a little bit for the first time in like, I don't know, 10, 15 years. And everybody went, oh, the first time the stock markets went down. And so they had a little bit of a sign that something might happen. Well, then a month later, on October 29th, 1929, the stock market started going down. And if we would have had the SEC, the Security and Exchange Commission, what would they have done on Black Tuesday? As soon as things got a little crazy and panicked, what would they have done to the stock market?
Shut it down.
Shut it down until they could get everybody with a level head and say, if everybody runs and sells their stock at the same time, what's going to happen? Everything's going to plummet. Okay? So it was about like that Take 5 commercial. And one of those guys was at the very end and he said, I don't see a problem. Because he couldn't see because his head was MRI. And so as soon as they pulled their head out, they opened up the stock market again, and they've closed down the stock market a couple times. When things get panicked or something happens, or even like 9/11, they close it down. And they shut it down until everybody can calm down and figure out what's going on, things like that. And so they regulate the stock market to hopefully never have a crash like they did on Black Tuesday. Now, FDR, to help get the people's, support and to help the economy and different things, FDR did something that no other president did before this time. FDR spoke to the people directly using what? Radio. And radio was a huge medium, and these were called the fireside chats. So during the fireside chats, he explained the New Deal, and he also asked for the public support to help change things. They restored the nation's confidence in the presidency and the government and the economy, and it helped. Even though things still stayed pretty bad, it changed their opinions. Now, I need some more room because we're not done. So I hope you have all this. And yeah, you're gonna get writer crap today because the New Deal has so many things. I want to erase that part of it. So like I said, in the first 100 days, they passed as many things as they can. Some of the stuff was the AAA. And it's not what you think. The Agriculture Adjustment Act, the AAA, to help farmers raise crop prices by lowering production. Now, one thing I didn't talk about yet was about 1930, the crop prices were still bad and farmers began to burn their crops, dump out their milk, because they'd rather get no money than to sell it to people for what it wasn't worth, you know? It didn't even pay the bills, so they just burned crops. Now, maybe I talked to you guys about supply and demand. If the supply is greater than the demand, the price does what? Okay, so diamonds are really valuable things, right? Did we talk about diamonds? Are diamonds rare?
No,
No, they're not. But how come do they cost so much money?
because it's a false scarcity.
Because, right, there's about 3 companies that own all the diamond mines in the world, right? So if they flooded the market with the diamonds, how much would a diamond be worth? Not as much. They'd be a lot cheaper. But they only allow so many diamonds to trickle out every year. They have stockpiles of diamonds, but they only let so many diamonds go out every year. So the price of the diamonds says high. Now the farmers didn't realize that coming out of World War I, they were producing way more than the America could use. And so the prices went down, and then Calvin Coolidge vetoed the price supports on the farmers, and then farmers started losing their land, and that was a bad deal. That happened early in the 20s, like the 25, right around there. So if you look at that, we knew the Great Depression there was something gonna happen. Okay. Now, the New Deal also included programs such as the TVA, which I'd kind of go under kind of an agricultural thing, but the TVA. Tennessee Valley Authority was huge, and it created a lot of jobs, and it produced dams in the Tennessee Valley, which created hydroelectricity that gave electricity to 2 or 3 states. That's a lot. It is also, and this is important, it is also one of the lasting legacies of the New Deal. A lot of times we're like, what is going to be the lasting legacy of a president? Well, the New Deal had a couple of things that still survived and were huge to America. The TVA was one of those things. The Tennessee Valley Authority created hydroelectricity to the Tennessee Valley and a lot of jobs at this time period. It was huge. Okay? Another one is the CCC. Can you get that one, Cooper?
Cross Country Corporation.
Civilian. Conservation. Corn. So what did this do? It put young men to work building roads and planting trees, building bridges. So there's a couple things in Montana the CCC did. The CCC, has anybody been to the Fred Robertson Bridge? And I didn't really know this until I stopped by one of those road signs, and then you read it, and then you're like, oh my gosh, I teach about this. But the Fred Robertson Bridge was built by the CCC. I'm not sure exactly if it was during the Great Depression or just shortly after, But they built the Fred Robinson Bridge, so everybody's like, Fred Robinson Bridge. It crosses Missouri on your way to Malta or Havre. It's right there. It's a big, huge bridge.
What does it go over?
Missouri.
Oh, I didn't hear you say that.
That's okay.
But now that
You remembered I said it?
Yeah.
People like to do paddle fishing and other kind of fishing down at the Fred Robinson. They have a campground. It's actually a pretty nice campground right there. You can stay at off of the Fred Robinson on the Missouri right there. So I believe the Fort Peck was also maybe something that put people to work in this time period. And FDR was a little different than Hoover because he believed in direct relief. And so the New Deal created the Federal Emergency Relief Administration. And I know there's tons of stuff.
I hated this section.
Federal Emergency Relief Bad thing is all these are on the test, every one of them. You could also go the FERA. Basically provided direct relief of food, clothing, and cash to the needy. Something Hoover did not do. I guess it worked because FDR won 4 elections, re-elections. Okay, he won the first one in 3 re-elections. He served 3 whole terms as president and started the 4th before he passed away, right at the end of World War II. That's another reason why he didn't really want to let the American people down. We were right in the middle of World War II, and Hitler and Nazis and Germany and those countries were not Japan. Hi. I was wondering when you were going to come get your plate.
Yeah, I totally forgot about it.
Someone already did your class. Oh, there's Isaiah. I'm Isaiah.
Almost today.
Wait, did
Twin day.
Did your class already get taken pictures of?
No.
No?
Do we have any twins?
Me and Trevor.
Oh. That's the OG.
And you do a backflip.
Are they back flippers? Can he do a backflip? Really? That's awesome. I'd be too scared to do a backflip. Cooper, you do a backflip?
I mean, I probably could if I tried, but I'm not gonna get hurt.
Try.
Yeah, because I'd be stupid and land on my belly or something.
Yeah.
I think that if like I was like kidnapped by like terrorists and like they were like pointing guns at me and said do a backflip or it would kill you, I
You might
probably
do it?
could do it on the first try.
You could?
Yeah.
Trevor, that's what he always did. He'd rather do a backflip in front of everybody than speak. That was awesome.
My life's on the line. I could probably do anything. Could probably dunk a basketball.
What's the cheer team we're doing?
Taking pictures of Morgan before she leaves to go to a Sherry Hill pageant.
What did you just say?
Oregon is so cool.
Morgan's going to New York for a Sherry Hill pageant.
Bitter about it.
I don't even know who Sherry Hill is.
I just kind of ruined it. I'm gonna stop it there. Ah.